So in continuing the psychosocial crisis, for the microsystem, she stated that was her school, church, work, home, and neighborhood environments. For the mesosystem, those are the interactions between those environments. So her interactions with from home and work, home and church, church and work, and school and home. For the exosystem and macrosystem, she stated she didn't really identify with any influential social settings or cultural factors. The second theory that I chose to focus on was emerging adulthood. We had talked a bit about this, I believe it was in week 6. But I did find an article that focused specifically on relationships by Schulman and Connolly. In this article, they pretty much talked about a lot of what Professor Jeffrey Arnett had proposed, that this was the in-between stage that occurs during the ages of 18 and 25, and it's defined as a period of finding one's self. The important things within this theory were finding a balance between identity, education, and career, because that would be a determination for the longevity of a relationship. So what Schulman and Connolly were talking about in this article was how during this stage, ages of 18 to 25, an individual may not be able to maintain a long-term relationship and choose to engage in a lot of short-term relationships, or flings as we call it in modern day, because they're so focused on themselves at the time that they're not yet capable or have not developed the capability to be able to care about another person's needs at the same level as their own at the time, because they're still in the process of finding their own identity. It's still trying to define what they want out of life and what their aspirations are going to be, and are immersed in that part of themselves during that time frame. And I felt like this was an important theory to bring into play just from interviewing my aunt, because she was very goal driven at this period of her life between the ages of 18 and 25. Just all the things that she had accomplished, specifically in emerging adulthood. One of the things that they discussed is how relationships and values about relationships, and how young people's attitudes are towards relationships has really shifted now, in 2017, compared to how it was in the 60s and the 70s, which is around when my aunt got married. She got married very fast, right out of high school, but there was so much more longevity in those relationships. People stayed because they felt like they had to, or didn't necessarily believe in divorce. They believed in trying to work through things and push through things, and that was the case with my aunt. She experienced a lot of control in her relationship, and I think that she immersed herself in her career and in her education, in an effort to kind of find herself, in an effort to kind of say, hey, this is something that I actually have control over. I control my destiny. I can control my future in these areas of my life. I can choose to be successful at these things and put my focus and my attention into these things, and something will come out of it. One of the things that she had mentioned to me was that when she has new employees coming now, because she's in upper level management, she gets to meet with these individuals and complete orientation with them, and she always lets them know, don't let this be your last stop here. Don't let this be the only job that you go for. Continue to go out and seek better paying jobs. Go to school, get an education, so that you're able to do something more than this. And she explained that this was not in a way of putting herself down for not doing more, but she stated that she always wants to pass on to the next generation to do more than what she did, so that they're able to see the world and see all the opportunities that are out there, not just what's inside of one job or one agency. I think that this is very important to mention when it comes to relationships, because a lot of times, as they've explained during this stage, Professor Jeffrey Arnett and Schulman and Connolly as well, it's very difficult for a person who's in the process of maturing and learning how to be an adult and learning how to have responsibility and accountability to focus on the needs of another person when they have needs themselves. So I think that for the purposes of this stage, what my aunt experienced, what she went through, once we talk through the other stages, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair, she was able to look back and say, hey, I see now that I feel like maybe if I had focused a little bit more on myself in the past, I may have been able to see a lot of things coming before they actually happened to me, and I may have been able to secure my own future, my own destiny a little bit better. She does feel that she is in that stage of life where she's feeling very independent and very self-sufficient, and she's grateful for that. But at the same time, she does have a longingness for wanting to be back in a stable relationship again. Some of the limitations of this theory, one major one that I noticed was the contrast with attitudes about relationships in Western civilization and Western cultures. Obviously, in Western cultures, there is a lot more parental control over relationships. A lot of times, parents are either sort of matching their children with who they want their potential mates to be, or they have more say-so about who they want their children to be in relationships with. I think that a major difference between the Western countries and America is that a lot of how relationships are portrayed here in America has a lot to do with what is seen in the media. I think a lot of times, especially when you're looking at this population from 18 to 25, a major part of how they find their identity has to do with what they see in the media. How to look, how to dress, where to go to school, where to shop for the best clothes, what type of relationship do you want, what kind of money do you want to make. A lot of the decisions that they make are based off of who they look up to doing with their lives, and trying to figure out where they fit in society, whatever their goals are. Do they want to be popular? Do they want to be invisible? Do they want to be seen? Do they want to be known? Do they want to network? Are they extroverted? Are they introverted? A lot of those things have to do with what they see the people around them do and what they choose to emulate. Whereas in Western civilization, they don't really have that much control to really think for themselves all the time. Sometimes a lot of what they do is dictated by their elders, and there's a certain respect that they have to have for whatever those decisions are that are made for them. Another thing that I noticed is, just in speaking about relationships, I feel that some of the barriers that could be present from successful relationships being able to occur, a lot of young people in that age range are not really aware sometimes about what domestic violence actually is. It's much more prevalent now than what it was, because a lot of times it's so much more subtle than what it was back in the 60s and 70s, where you knew if a person was hitting you that in a relationship that was wrong. Now there's different forms of abuse that people don't even realize. There's verbal abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's there's financial abuse, reproductive abuse. So there's a lot of things that young people are not aware of that can kind of prevent them from being able to have longevity in relationships. Not just the fact that they're trying to find themselves, or they're focused on their education and their career. There's just a lot of things that may be happening in those relationships they just don't see if they're not used to seeing it, or they have not been exposed to it. The third limitation that I was looking at is diversity in values regarding relationships. So just kind of thinking about all of the different cultures and how relationships are defined within those cultures. I don't feel that was really taken into consideration when they conducted this study, because how people, what values people should have within relationships, or what their ethics or morals are, have a lot to do with how successful their relationships are going to be. And that is my presentation. Thank you.